Alpha Queen claimed the fallen tower, until the lunar wolf dog showed her what lurked below. I had conquered 12 kingdoms without drawing a blade, but the moment I stepped into the ruins of the lunar tower, I knew this conquest would cost me blood. The wind howled through the broken stones as I dismounted from my horse, my boots sinking into earth that had not been disturbed in decades. The tower rose before me like a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at the moon, its crumbling walls covered in black ivy that seemed to writhe in the darkness. This was it, the heart of my bloodline, the source of power my great-grandmother had died protecting. And I, Aurora Wintermoon, the last of my line at 32 years old, had finally found it after 6 years of searching through dusty archives and forgotten maps. Beside me, Lycan Ashenwolf shook his massive silver coat, his ears flattening against his skull. He was no ordinary wolf dog. My mystical companion had been with me since I was 20, a gift from a wandering witch who told me I would need eyes that could see beyond the veil. At the time, I thought she was mad. Now, watching Lycan's lips pull back from his fangs as he stared at the tower entrance, I understood she had been preparing me for this moment. I pulled my fur-lined cloak tighter against the November chill. Poland in 1666 was unforgiving, but I had learned to be more unforgiving still. 12 kingdoms had bent to my will, not through the edge of a sword, but through the sharpness of my mind. I negotiated trade agreements that made war unprofitable. I arranged marriages between feuding families. I found common enemies to unite fractured alliances. My court whispered that I was blessed by the moon goddess herself, that my diplomatic victories were proof of divine favor. They did not know the truth. I was desperate. Without an heir, my kingdom would fracture the moment I died. Without a mate bond, I could not produce a child strong enough to hold the throne. And without the lunar crystals hidden somewhere in this forsaken tower, I would never awaken the magic needed to call a true mate to my side. The Wintermoon Queens had always been powerful, always been blessed with fated mates who shared their strength, but something had broken in my bloodline. My mother died bringing me into the world, her mate bond shattered by grief. My grandmother had been murdered before I was born, her mate lost to madness. I was the last, the broken end of a once great dynasty. The ancient texts I had studied as a child spoke of this tower in reverent whispers. It had been built on a convergence of ley lines, a place where the veil between the mortal world and the realm of the moon goddess was thin as gossamer. The lunar crystals buried beneath its foundation could amplify magic, heal the wounded, and most importantly, call to a destined mate across any distance. If I could restore this tower and claim the crystals, I might finally complete what my bloodline had been unable to finish. I might finally stop being alone. Lycan pressed against my leg, his warmth a comfort in the darkness. I ran my fingers through his fur, feeling the tension coiled in his powerful muscles. He sensed something that made even his ancient mystical blood run cold. We approached the entrance together, my hand resting on the pommel of my sword. The blade had been my grandmother's, forged from silver blessed under a full moon, and etched with runes of protection. I had never used it in anger, but I knew how. My tutors had insisted that even a diplomatic queen needed to know how to defend herself. The tower's entrance was a gaping maw of broken stone, the wooden doors long since rotted away. Black ivy crawled up the archway like grasping fingers, and the smell of decay and damp earth filled my nostrils. I could see the night sky through gaps in the ceiling high above, moonlight streaming down in silver shafts that illuminated dancing dust motes, and the skeletal remains of what had once been a magnificent spiral staircase. The moment my boot crossed the threshold, Lycan's eyes exploded with silver light. I froze, my hand flying to my sword. I had seen Lycan's eyes glow before, when we encountered rogue mages, or when dark magic poisoned the land, but never like this. Never with such intensity that I had to shield my face from the brightness. His growl was low and continuous, a warning that made my wolf instincts, dormant since childhood, stir in the base of my spine. Powerful magic, dangerous magic, magic that had been waiting. I forced myself to breathe slowly, scanning the interior of the tower. Fallen columns lay scattered like broken teeth. What had once been a grand hall was now a graveyard of stone and shadow, moss covering every surface, water dripping steadily from cracks in the walls. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, and something else, something metallic and sharp that made my nose wrinkle. Blood, old blood, soaked into stone and never fully washed away. Then I saw it, a shadow among shadows, moving between the fallen columns with a grace that was decidedly not human. My heart began to pound, adrenaline flooding my system. Lycan's growl deepened, his haunches bunching as he prepared to spring. The shadow stepped into a shaft of moonlight, and my breath caught in my throat. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the narrow corridor behind him. His hair was black as a raven's wing, falling past his shoulders in waves that caught the silver light, but it was his eyes that held me captive. Storm gray, so pale they were almost colorless, burning with an intensity that made my knees weak, and my pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. His face was all sharp angles and harsh planes, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, deadly and mesmerizing. He wore no shirt despite the cold, and I could see his torso was covered in runes, intricate patterns carved and burned into his skin that glowed faintly with their own internal light. Ancient magic, binding magic, the kind that required blood sacrifice and unbreakable oaths. He was a mage, and from the way power crackled around his clenched fists, sending purple lightning dancing between his fingers, he was far more dangerous than anyone I had ever faced. His voice, when he spoke, was like thunder rolling across a battlefield, deep, commanding, edged with violence barely restrained. "Leave my tower," the words echoed through the ruins, and I felt them in my chest like a physical blow. This was not a request. It was a warning, a final chance to turn back before he made me regret my trespass. I should have been afraid. Any sane person would have been. But I was Aurora Wintermoon, Alfa Queen of Poland, the woman who had brought 12 kingdoms to heal without drawing blood. I did not bend. I did not break. And I most certainly did not run. I met his eyes, lifting my chin in defiance. "It was yours. Now it is mine." My hand moved to my sword, fingers wrapping around the hilt. The silver blade sang as I drew it, moonlight running along its edge like liquid mercury. I shifted my stance, knees bent, weight balanced. I had been trained by the best swordmasters in Europe. I knew I could not match a mage in raw power, but speed and skill could sometimes triumph where strength failed. The mage's expression shifted, something dark and hungry flashing through those storm gray eyes. His lips curved into a smile that was all predator, no warmth. "So be it, little queen." He moved. I barely had time to raise my blade before purple lightning crashed into my sword, the impact sending vibrations up my arm and nearly tearing the weapon from my grip. I rolled to the side, coming up behind a fallen column as another bolt of magic shattered stone where I had been standing. Chunks of rock exploded outward, and I felt a sharp sting as a fragment sliced across my cheek. Lycan launched himself at the mage with a snarl that was pure fury. The wolf dog was the size of a small pony, all muscle and mystical power, his fangs capable of tearing through armor. But the mage simply raised his hand, and a shimmering shield of silver light materialized in the air. Lycan slammed into it with a yelp, bouncing back and landing in a crouch, eyes still blazing. I used the distraction to attack. I came around the column low and fast, sword aimed for the mage's exposed side. He spun with inhuman speed, catching my blade with a gauntlet of solid magic that formed around his forearm. The clash of steel on magic sent sparks flying, illuminating his face in stuttering flashes. Up close, I could smell him, pine and smoke and something wild, something that made my wolf stir again, pressing against the cage I had locked it in years ago. We were close enough that I could see the individual runes carved into his skin, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that when he spoke, his breath ghosted across my lips. "You fight well, for a conqueror." I bared my teeth in a smile that was all challenge. "You defend well, for a hermit." I twisted, bringing my blade up in an arc meant to force him back, but he did not retreat. Instead, he released his magic gauntlet and caught my wrist in an iron grip, his other hand shooting out to grab my throat, not squeezing, not yet, but the threat was clear. He could crush my windpipe before I could even scream. But I was not helpless. My free hand came up with the silver dagger I kept strapped to my thigh, the blade pressing against his ribs, right over his heart. We were locked together, two predators testing each other's resolve, neither willing to back down. His eyes searched mine, and I felt something shift in the air between us. A charge, electric and undeniable, that made my skin prickle and my breath come faster. This close, I could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could see the way his pupils dilated as he took in my scent. His nostrils flared, and his grip on my throat tightened just slightly. "You smell like winter moonlight," he said, his voice rougher now, strained. "Like ice and starlight and something I have not encountered in 40 years. 40 years. My mind struggled to process that. He looked no older than 35, but mages aged differently. If he had truly been guarding this tower for 4 decades, he was far older than he appeared. "And you smell like loneliness," I whispered back, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Like someone who has forgotten what it means to be touched." His hand spasmed on my throat, not tightening but trembling. For a moment, something raw and vulnerable flashed across his face, quickly hidden behind a mask of cold fury. He released me abruptly. Stepping back so fast I stumbled. "You know nothing of me," he snarled, magic crackling around him like a cloak of lightning. "You come to steal what I have protected, what I have bled for, what I have sacrificed everything to keep safe. You are no different than the warlords and dark mages who have tried before you." I sheathed my dagger, but kept my sword raised, circling him slowly. Lycan had recovered and was pacing on my other side, creating a pincer formation, but I was not thinking about tactics anymore. I was thinking about the pain I had heard in the mage's voice, the desperation beneath his anger. "Then let me prove I am different," I said, lowering my sword but not sheathing it. "You accused me of seeking the crystals for evil conquest, but every land I have claimed was through diplomacy, not blood. I have ended wars, not started them. I have built alliances, not empires of ash. I am not the villain you imagine me to be." He stared at me, and I could see the war raging behind his eyes. Distrust warred with curiosity. Anger warred with something that looked dangerously like hope. "Words are cheap," he finally said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "Any conqueror can claim benevolence after the fact." I took a risk then. A calculated gamble that could either end with my throat slit or with a chance at what I truly needed. I dropped my sword completely, the blade clattering against the stone floor. Lycan whined in protest, but I held up my hand, signaling him to stay. I stood before this deadly mage, unarmed and exposed, and spoke the truth I had told no one. I am the last of the Wintermoon bloodline. Without the lunar crystals, my dynasty dies with me. I seek them not for conquest, but for survival, for the chance to complete what my ancestors could not, for the hope of finally calling a mate that can help me carry the burden of a crown that grows heavier every day I wear it alone. The silence that followed was deafening. The mage's expression was unreadable, but I saw his hands lower slowly, the magic dimming around his fingers. Lycan sat, though his eyes remained fixed on the mage, and I knew my companion was reading something in the man that I could not see. Finally, the mage spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. 40 years I have guarded this tower. 40 years since the Wintermoon dynasty fell to darkness, since your great-grandmother was murdered by those who sought the crystals for their own gain. 40 years I have watched every entrance, killed every intruder, bled into these stones to keep the magic sealed. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my heart clench. Recognition. Not of my face, but of my burden. "You are truly the last?" I nodded, my throat tight with emotion I refused to let show. "I am." He closed his eyes, and I saw his shoulders sag slightly, as though a weight he had carried for decades had finally become too much. When he opened them again, there was a resignation there that frightened me more than his anger had. 3 days, he said. "I will give you 3 days to prove you are worthy of what lies beneath this tower. If you can show me that you are not here to destroy, if you can prove that the Wintermoon magic flows true in your veins, then I will help you reclaim what is rightfully yours." He paused, and his next words were heavy with warning. "But if you betray me, if I sense even a whisper of darkness in your intentions, I will kill you myself, slowly, painfully, and your wolf cannot stop me." It was not a threat. It was a promise, and I believed every word. I bent to retrieve my sword, sheathing it slowly. 3 days. That is all I ask. I turned to leave, to exit the tower and make camp outside where I could plan my next move. But as I walked past him, our shoulders brushed, just the barest contact, fabric against bare skin. The shock that went through me was instantaneous and devastating. It was not pain, though it felt like lightning in my veins. It was recognition at a level deeper than thought, primal and undeniable. My wolf, dormant for so long I had almost forgotten its existence, roared to life inside me. The scent of him filled my lungs, and suddenly I was dizzy, my knees weak, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Mate. The word echoed through my mind in a voice that was mine and not mine, ancient and knowing. Mate, mate, mate. I stumbled, catching myself against a column, my breath coming in short gasps. I looked back at him and saw he had frozen as well, one hand pressed against his chest, his face pale with shock. He stared at me with wide eyes, and I knew he had felt it too. The mate bond. Impossible. Forbidden. Undeniable. For 40 years he had guarded this tower alone. For 32 years I had searched for the mate that would complete me. And here, in the ruins of my ancestral power, surrounded by decay and darkness, we had found each other. Or perhaps, we had been meant to find each other all along. Lycan looked between us, his tail wagging slowly, his eyes fading from silver to their normal amber. He sat directly between us, forcing us to acknowledge what had just happened, forcing us to face the truth neither of us was ready to accept. The mage, Theron, I would later learn his name was Theron Blackstone, spoke first, his voice raw and broken. This changes nothing, but we both knew that was a lie. This changed everything. He watched me like a wolf watches prey, but I could smell the loneliness bleeding from him. 40 years of isolation in ruins that should have been a temple. Dawn broke cold and gray over the tower, the weak November sun doing little to warm the stone or my bones. I had spent the night in what remained of the eastern wing, wrapped in my cloak with lichen pressed against my back for warmth. Sleep had been fitful, my dreams haunted by storm-gray eyes, and the phantom sensation of electricity coursing through my veins every time I remembered that brief touch. The mate bond hummed beneath my skin like a second heartbeat, impossible to ignore, impossible to accept. Theron had disappeared after our encounter, vanishing into the depths of the tower without another word. I did not blame him. What could either of us say? We were strangers bound by fate, enemies forced into alliance, queen and guardian separated by 4 decades and 1,000 unspoken fears. When I emerged from my makeshift shelter, he was waiting in what had once been the main hall. He wore a different shirt now, rough spun linen that did nothing to hide the runes carved into his skin, the patterns visible through the thin fabric. His hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He looked like a man who had not truly slept in years. "You stayed," he said, and there was something in his voice I could not quite name. Surprise? Relief? Disappointment? I gave my word. 3 days to prove myself worthy. I approached slowly, keeping my hands visible, non-threatening. Lycan padded beside me, his amber eyes fixed on Theron with an intensity that bordered on protective. "I intend to use every moment." Theron nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then we begin. The tower is vast, far more extensive than what you saw last night. If you are to understand what you claim, you must see all of it." He turned without waiting for my response, expecting me to follow. I did, matching his long strides through corridors choked with debris and memories. He moved through the ruins with the ease of long familiarity, stepping over fallen stones and ducking beneath collapsed archways without breaking pace. I studied him as we walked, noting the way his shoulders tensed whenever we passed certain doorways, the way his jaw clenched when we entered rooms where moonlight fell through broken ceilings. This tower was not just his prison, it was his tomb, the place where he had buried himself alive to protect something he believed was greater than his own life. "There are 7 levels to the Lunar Tower," Theron said, his voice echoing off stone walls thick with moss. 3 above ground, 4 below. The upper levels housed the royal court when your ancestors ruled here. The middle levels contained the libraries, the laboratories, the observatories where lunar magic was studied and refined. The lower levels. He paused, his hand resting on a section of wall that looked no different from any other. "The lower levels hold the secrets your family died to protect." He pressed his palm flat against the stone, and I felt magic pulse through the air, thick and ancient. The wall shimmered, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The smell that wafted up was damp earth and old parchment, mildew and something metallic that made my wolf stir uneasily. "Stay close," Theron commanded, conjuring a ball of silver light that hovered above his palm. "The lower levels are not stable. One wrong step and you will fall through floors that have been rotting for decades." I followed him down, lichen pressing against my legs as we descended. The stairs were treacherous, worn smooth by time and use, some cracked nearly in half. Water dripped from unseen sources, and I could hear the skitter of small creatures fleeing from our light. The air grew colder with each step, until I could see my breath misting before my face. The first chamber we entered had once been a library. I knew this only because remnants of bookshelves still clung to the walls, their wood warped and twisted by water damage. Books lay scattered across the floor, their pages fused together by moisture and time, covers cracked and illegible. I knelt beside one pile, carefully separating pages that crumbled at my touch. These were grimoires, I whispered, my throat tight with grief for knowledge lost. Spell books, records of lunar magic passed down through generations. I tried to save what I could, Theron said, and I heard the failure in his voice, the weight of inadequacy. When I sealed myself in, I preserved the most important texts in the deeper chambers. But these, there were too many. I could not carry them all. I looked up at him, seeing the pain etched in every line of his face. You did what you could, more than anyone else would have. He turned away, but not before I saw the muscle jump in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. It was not enough. It is never enough. We moved through chamber after chamber, each one revealing more of the tower's former glory and current decay. There was a laboratory where glass vials and beakers lay shattered on stone tables, their contents long since evaporated or congealed into unrecognizable sludge. There was a meditation room with a pool in the center that must have once reflected moonlight from mirrors positioned in the ceiling, now filled with stagnant water and the corpses of insects. There was an observatory where the collapsed roof had allowed trees to grow through the floor, their roots tearing apart intricate mechanisms that had once tracked the moon's phases with perfect precision. Each room was a piece of my heritage destroyed, a fragment of power lost. And with each room, I felt the weight of my responsibility grow heavier. I was the last winter moon. If I failed here, there would be no one left to remember what we had been, what we had built. Tell me what happened, I said, as we rested in what remained of the observatory, sitting on a fallen beam while lichen explored the perimeter. You said my great-grandmother was murdered. The histories I read said she died of illness, that the tower was abandoned because the bloodline moved to the capital. Theron was silent for so long, I thought he might refuse to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, drained of all emotion, as though he had told this story so many times to himself that it had lost all meaning. I was 32 when I took my oath as the tower's guardian. Your great-grandmother, Celestine Wintermoon, was my queen, my mentor, the woman who taught me everything I know about lunar magic. She was brilliant, powerful, and absolutely terrifying when she wanted to be. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She reminded me of you, actually. That same steel spine, that refusal to bend even when the world demanded it. He paused, staring at his hands as though seeing blood that no amount of time could wash away. There was a coven. The Shadow Sisters, they called themselves. Witches who had turned their backs on the moon goddess, who sought power through corruption and sacrifice. They wanted the lunar crystals, believed they could use them to tear down the barrier between our world and the realm of shadows, unleashing demons and dark magic upon the land. My blood ran cold. I had read of such covens in the forbidden texts, warnings scrawled in my ancestors' hands about the price of such magic. They came for the crystals. They came with an army, mercenaries, dark mages, creatures summoned from nightmares. The battle lasted 3 days. Your great-grandmother fought like a goddess made flesh, her mate at her side, their power combined devastating to behold. But the Shadow Sisters had planned their attack perfectly. They poisoned the ley lines feeding the tower, corrupting the very magic your family used to defend themselves. Theron's voice cracked, and he had to pause, swallowing hard before continuing. On the third night, they breached the upper levels. Celestine ordered everyone to evacuate, to take her children and grandchildren and flee while she held the tower. I refused. I was her guardian. My oath bound me to protect this place and the magic within it unto death. She was killed, I whispered, already knowing how this story ended, but needing to hear it nonetheless. She was butchered, Theron corrected, his voice now sharp with rage that had not dimmed in 40 years. They murdered her mate first, right in front of her, breaking their bond and sending her into madness. Then they tortured her for the location of the crystal chamber, for the words to break the seals I had placed. She never told them. Even as they cut her apart piece by piece, she never spoke the words. Tears burned my eyes, rage and grief tangling in my chest until I could not breathe. And you? I killed them all, Theron said flatly. Every mercenary, every dark mage, every one of the Shadow Sisters. I channeled every drop of power the tower had left and I burned them from existence. Then I sealed the tower from the inside, locking away the crystals and myself along with them. I would not let anyone else die for this place. I would not fail again. 40 years. I breathed, the enormity of his sacrifice finally hitting me. You have been alone here for 40 years. He looked at me then, and the loneliness I saw in his storm-gray eyes was so profound it made my heart crack. Everyone I loved died that night. My queen, my friends, the woman I thought might one day be my mate. The tower became my penance, my prison, my purpose. I have stood guard over bones and memories, waiting for enemies who stopped coming, protecting crystals that no one remembered existed. I reached out without thinking, my hand covering his where it rested on the beam between us. The mate bond flared immediately, warm and insistent, wrapping around us like invisible threads pulling us closer. Theron stared at our joined hands, his breathing shallow, his whole body rigid with tension. You did not fail, I said fiercely. You saved the crystals. You preserved the tower's secrets. You honored your oath when anyone else would have fled. You are not a failure, Theron Blackstone. You are the most loyal guardian my family has ever known. He pulled his hand away as though burned, standing abruptly and putting distance between us. Do not romanticize what I am. I am a man who chose stone and solitude over life. I am a ruin, just like this tower. Then tell me how to restore both, I challenged, standing to face him. You said 3 days. Teach me. Show me what I need to know to prove I am worthy of the crystals, to reclaim what my bloodline lost. He studied me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You truly mean to rebuild this place. I mean to do more than rebuild. I mean to restore it to what it was and make it stronger. But I cannot do it alone. I need your knowledge, your magic, I hesitated, then forged ahead. Your partnership. The word hung between us, weighted with meanings neither of us was ready to examine. Partnership could mean many things. Allies, colleagues, or something far more intimate, far more permanent. Theron closed his eyes, a muscle working in his jaw. When he opened them again, there was resignation mixed with something that looked dangerously like hope. Very well. If you are to be the tower's queen, you must learn its magic. Come. The next hours blurred together as Theron led me deeper into the tower's secrets. He showed me chambers I never would have found on my own, spaces hidden behind illusions, and locked by magic that responded only to his touch. There was a room filled with crystals smaller than the lunar crystals, but no less precious, each one attuned to a different phase of the moon, humming with stored power. There was a chamber where the walls were covered in astronomical charts, mapping the movement of celestial bodies across centuries, predictions and prophecies written in languages I could barely decipher, and there were personal spaces. A bedroom that had once belonged to someone important. The furniture rotted but still arranged as though waiting for its owner to return. Theron lingered in the doorway of that room, his expression unreadable, before moving on without explanation. Later, I would learn it had been Celestine's chambers, preserved exactly as she had left them the night she died. We worked through the afternoon and into evening, Theron teaching me the basics of lunar magic, how to draw power from the moon's phases, how to channel energy through crystal focuses, how to read the ancient texts that held my family's accumulated knowledge. I absorbed everything like a woman dying of thirst, finally given water. This was my heritage, my birthright, the magic I should have learned at my mother's knee but never had the chance to know. Theron was a patient teacher, correcting my hand positions, adjusting my pronunciation of spell words, explaining the theory behind each ritual, but I noticed the way he maintained careful distance, never touching me directly, always placing objects between us when he needed to demonstrate something. He was terrified of the mate bond, I realized, terrified of what it meant, what it would demand of him after 40 years of intentional isolation. As night fell, we made camp in what had once been a sitting room near the library level. Theron conjured a small fire, actual flame, not magical light, and we sat in companionable silence, eating the dried meat and bread I had brought in my packs. Lycan lay between us as he had the night before, his massive head resting on my thigh, his tail occasionally thumping against Theron's leg. He likes you, I observed, scratching behind Lycan's ears. He does not usually trust people so quickly. Wolf dogs are excellent judges of character, Theron replied, a small smile tugging at his lips as he reached out to stroke Lycan's flank. And mystical ones doubly so. He knows I mean you no harm. Do you? I asked quietly. Mean me no harm? Theron's hand stilled on Lycan's fur. I mean you no harm, Aurora Wintermoon, but I cannot promise I will not hurt you. The mate bond. He trailed off, shaking his head. I do not know if I am capable of being what you need. And what is it you think I need? A king, a partner who can stand beside you in the light of day, not a hermit who has forgotten how to be human. You deserve someone whole, not someone broken beyond repair. I set down my food, leaning forward so he had no choice but to meet my eyes. You want to know what I need? I need someone who understands what it means to sacrifice everything for duty, someone who will not crumble under the weight of a crown. Someone loyal enough to guard an empty tower for 40 years, just in case someone worthy finally came. I paused, letting my next words carry all the truth I possessed. I need someone exactly like you. Theron's expression shattered, vulnerability flooding his features before he could hide it. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. You think I am whole? I am the last of my bloodline at 32, unmated, without heir, carrying a kingdom on my shoulders that expects me to be perfect, while whispering that I am cursed. I am as broken as you are, Theron. The only difference is, I am very good at hiding it. For the first time since we met, Theron laughed. It was a rusty sound, as though his throat had forgotten how, but it was genuine. We are quite a pair, are we not? The ruined guardian and the cursed queen. Then perhaps we can be ruined together, I said softly. The atmosphere shifted, the air between us charging with the same electricity I had felt when we touched. Theron's eyes darkened, his pupils dilating as he inhaled deeply, scenting me as wolves do. I knew what he smelled. Arousal, interest, the biological imperative of a mate bond demanding recognition. But he did not move closer. Instead, he stood abruptly, putting the fire between us. You should rest. Tomorrow I will show you the sealed doors to the crystal chamber. You need to understand what you are asking to access before we proceed further. It was a dismissal, clear and absolute. I wanted to argue, to push, to demand he stop running from what we both felt. But I was a diplomat before I was anything else. I knew when to press and when to retreat. Good night, Theron, I said, settling into my bedroll with lichen curling against my back. Good night, Aurora, he replied, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. I did not sleep well that night either. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the phantom touch of his hand, heard the pain in his voice when he spoke of being broken, saw the longing he tried so desperately to hide. The mate bond thrummed between us like a taut string, vibrating with each breath he took across the fire. The second day followed a similar pattern. Theron showed me more of the tower, teaching me more of its secrets. We worked side by side, planning how the restoration might proceed, discussing what would need to be done to make the upper levels habitable again. I shared my vision for the tower as not just a repository of power, but a place of learning, where young Wintermoons could come to study their heritage, where the magic would be preserved and passed down instead of hoarded and hidden. Theron listened to my ideas with growing interest, occasionally offering suggestions, pointing out structural weaknesses that would need to be addressed, identifying chambers that could be converted to new purposes. I realized he was not just teaching me about the tower. He was teaching me how to think like its guardian, how to anticipate threats and plan for centuries instead of years. You would have made an excellent queen, I told him, as we surveyed the collapsed observatory, both of us mentally calculating what it would take to rebuild. I am a man, he pointed out dryly. King, then. You think strategically, you plan for every contingency. You understand sacrifice and duty. Those are the qualities that make a good ruler, regardless of gender, says the woman who conquered 12 kingdoms without drawing her blade. Exactly. I understand what true power looks like, and it is not brute strength or magical might. It is knowing when to fight and when to negotiate, when to hold firm and when to bend, when to lead and when to follow. I turned to face him fully. You have that same understanding. You chose to seal yourself in this tower not because you were weak, but because you knew it was the only way to protect what mattered most. Theron looked away, but not before I saw the effect my words had on him. He was not used to being seen, I realized. 40 years alone had convinced him he was nothing more than his failures, his regrets, his self-imposed exile. I was determined to show him otherwise. On the third evening, we finally stood before the sealed doors. They were massive things, carved from a single piece of black stone shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with their own light. Runes covered every inch of their surface, words in languages so old even I could not read them all. The magic radiating from the doors was palpable, thick enough to taste, powerful enough to make my bones ache. "This is as far as I can take you without breaking my oath," Theron said, his hand resting on the stone beside the doors. "The crystal chamber lies beyond. Only those of Wintermoon blood can open these doors. But doing so will trigger wards I placed 40 years ago. The tower will know someone has accessed the crystals, and anyone watching for that signal will know as well," I finished, understanding the danger immediately. "Precisely. If enemies still seek the crystals, opening these doors will paint a target on your back." I studied the doors, my mind already working through possibilities and contingencies. "Then we ensure we are ready for whatever comes. We fortify the upper levels, set our own wards, prepare defensive positions." "We?" Theron asked quietly. I turned to face him. "We. Unless you intend to abandon your post now that the Wintermoon heir has finally returned." He stopped, seeming to struggle with something internal. "I do not know what I intend anymore. 3 days ago, my purpose was clear. Guard the tower, kill intruders, protect the crystals. Now, I prompted, stepping closer. "Now everything has changed," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have changed everything, Aurora. The way you speak of the tower, your plans for its future, your conviction that broken things can be restored. I had forgotten what hope felt like. I had forgotten what it meant to want something beyond mere survival." My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. We were standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the pine and smoke scent that had haunted my dreams. The mate bond was screaming now, demanding acknowledgement, demanding completion. "What do you want, Theron?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my attempt at composure. His eyes met mine, storm-gray depths turbulent with emotion. "I want things I have no right to want. I want to see this tower restored. I want to teach you everything I know. I want to watch you reclaim your heritage and rebuild your dynasty. I want—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "I want to stop being alone." I reached up, cupping his face with both hands, feeling the rasp of stubble against my palms, the tension coiled in every muscle. "Then stop. Stop pushing me away. Stop telling yourself you are not worthy. Stop hiding behind 40 years of self-imposed penance. You are a queen," he breathed, but he did not pull away. "I am nothing. You are my mate," I whispered, finally speaking aloud what we had both known since that first touch. "You are the man the moon goddess herself chose for me, and I am choosing you right back." The distance between us evaporated. I did not know who moved first, whether I pulled him down or he bent to me, but suddenly his mouth was on mine and the world caught fire. The mate bond exploded, no longer a subtle hum, but a roaring inferno that consumed every coherent thought. His hands fisted in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I responded with equal desperation, my fingers digging into his shoulders, trying to pull him closer, even though there was no space left between us. He tasted like winter storms and wild magic, like loneliness and hope and 40 years of denial finally breaking. I poured everything I had into that kiss, every frustration, every longing, every moment of isolation I had endured as the last of my line. He met me with equal intensity, groaning against my mouth as his hands slid down my back, pressing me against the sealed doors. When we finally broke apart, both gasping for air, his forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed, his expression one of profound anguish and desperate joy, tangled together. "This is madness," he whispered. "Yes," I agreed. "You are a queen. I am a ruin, just like this tower. Then we rebuild together," I said, echoing my words from earlier. "You said it yourself. Broken things can be restored. We restore the tower, we restore the dynasty, we restore each other." He opened his eyes, and I saw everything in that gaze, fear and hope, doubt and certainty, 40 years of loneliness meeting the promise of a future he had not dared imagine. Before he could respond, before either of us could say anything more, Lycan's warning howl shattered the moment. We sprang apart, both of us immediately scanning for threats. Lycan stood between us and the sealed doors, his eyes glowing crimson, the color he only displayed when detecting dark magic, malevolent intent, imminent danger. Theron's face went deathly pale. "No, it is not possible." "What?" I demanded, drawing my sword, even though I did not know what we faced. "Someone is in the lower levels," Theron said, his voice hollow with shock. "Someone has breached the inner wards. Someone is trying to open the sealed doors from the other side." We both froze, listening, and then I heard it. Footsteps, echoing up from far below, from chambers deeper than any we had explored, from places Theron swore no one could access. Footsteps coming closer. Multiple sets, deliberate, purposeful. Someone had been waiting, watching, and now they were making their move. "My 3 days are up," I said quietly, gripping my sword so tightly my knuckles went white. "Time to prove I am worthy of the crystals. Time to prove I can protect them just as fiercely as you have." Theron looked at me, and despite the fear in his eyes, despite the danger echoing up from below, he smiled. It was a warrior's smile, fierce and proud. "Then let us defend your heritage together, my queen." And as the footsteps grew louder, as Lycan's growl deepened to a warning that promised violence, as Theron's hands began to glow with ancient magic, and I felt my own dormant power finally awakening in response, I knew that whatever came next would define not just my worthiness of the crystals. It would define whether the last winter moon would fall like all the others, or rise to reclaim everything her bloodline had lost. The tower had kept its secrets for 40 years, but something ancient and hungry was waking beneath our feet. The footsteps echoed up from depths I had not known existed, rhythmic and deliberate, accompanied by a sound that made my skin crawl, chanting in a language that tasted of rot and corruption on my tongue, even though I could not understand the words. Lycan's crimson eyes blazed brighter, his hackles raised so high he looked twice his normal size, a continuous growl rumbling from his chest that I felt vibrating through the stone floor. Theron moved before I could speak, his hands already weaving complex patterns in the air, layering shields and wards around us with practiced efficiency. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice hard with a warrior's focus I had not heard before. "Whatever is down there should not be able to access these levels. The wards I placed 40 years ago are failing," I finished, feeling it in my bones, in the connection to this tower that sang through my winter moon blood. I can feel them unraveling. Something is pulling them apart thread by thread. His eyes snapped to mine, storm-gray depths flickering with silver light as his magic surged. "That is impossible. Those wards were blood-sealed. Only I can release them, or—" He stopped, realization draining the color from his face. "Or someone of winter moon blood." My stomach dropped, but I did not touch the wards. I have not gone near the sealed doors until today. "You did not have to touch them," Theron said grimly, already moving toward the staircase that led down to the chambers below the sealed doors, to levels he had not shown me because he claimed they were too dangerous, too unstable. "Your presence alone was enough. Your blood, your magic, your connection to this place. It all acts as a key whether you will it or not. The moment you crossed the threshold 3 days ago, you began weakening every protection tied to the winter moon lineage." Horror crashed over me like ice water. "I led them here. Whoever is down there, whatever wants the crystals, I opened the door for them." "You could not have known," Theron said, but there was no comfort in his words, only grim acceptance of a tactical reality. "And recriminations will not help us now. We need to see what we are facing, how many there are, and how much time we have before they reach the crystal chamber." I drew my sword, the silver blade humming with its own magic, responding to my rising fear and fury. Lycan pressed against my leg, his massive body tense and ready to attack, to defend, to kill if necessary. The 3 of us descended into darkness, following the sound of footsteps and chanting that grew louder with each step. The temperature dropped so drastically I could see my breath forming clouds in the air, could feel frost forming on the stone walls, spreading in patterns that looked disturbingly like grasping hands. The smell hit me next, copper and sulfur, burning herbs and something sweet and sickly that made my stomach turn. Blood magic, dark rituals, corruption so thick I could taste it coating my throat. Theron's light grew brighter, pushing back shadows that seemed reluctant to retreat, that clung to corners and crevices as though they were alive and aware. We passed through a chamber I had not seen before, one that must have been magnificent once, with a vaulted ceiling painted with constellations and walls carved with scenes of winter moon queens throughout history. Now those queens watched us with empty eyes from faces half destroyed by time and water damage, their stone mouths open in silent screams. The footsteps had stopped. The chanting had stopped. We stood in that chamber, listening to our own breathing, to Lycan's low growl, to the drip of water from somewhere unseen. The silence was worse than the noise had been. pregnant with anticipation, with the certainty that something was waiting, watching, preparing to strike. Then we saw the blood. It was fresh, so fresh it still steamed in the frigid air, splattered across the floor in patterns that were definitely not random. Runes, circles, the geometric precision of ritual magic, designed to channel power and bend reality. The blood formed a path leading to an archway I had not noticed before, one that seemed to pulse with sickly green light, revealing stairs that descended even deeper into the tower's foundations. Moon goddess preserve us, Theron breathed, his face ashen. That archway should not exist. I sealed it. I collapsed the stairs. I poured magic and my own blood into making certain no one could ever access the deep chambers. What is down there? I asked, though part of me did not want to know. The old ways, the first rituals, magic from before the Wintermoon dynasty, before civilization even, wild magic, primal magic, the kind that demands blood and suffering and sacrifice. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising in its intensity. Aurora, if they have reached the deep chambers, if they have accessed what sleeps there, a scream cut through the air, high and agonized, and definitely human, female, young, the sound of someone dying badly, someone being used for something terrible. Without thinking, I ran toward that sound, toward the archway, toward whatever horror awaited below. I heard Theron cursing behind me, heard Lycan's claws scrabbling on stone as he followed, but I could not stop. Someone was being murdered in my ancestral tower, and I would not let it happen, would not fail to act when action might save a life. The stairs were steep and slick with blood, fresh enough that my boots left prints. The green light grew brighter as we descended, and I realized it was coming from crystals embedded in the walls. Not lunar crystals, but something else, something wrong, pulsing with energy that felt diseased and corrupted. The air was so thick with dark magic, I felt like I was drowning in it, could feel it trying to worm its way into my lungs, my blood, my very soul. At the bottom of the stairs lay a chamber that made me stop in my tracks, bile rising in my throat. It was a temple of sorts, with an altar at its center made from black stone shot through with veins of sickly green that matched the corrupted crystals in the walls. And on that altar lay a young woman, no more than 16, her throat slit from ear to ear, her blood pouring down channels carved into the stone, feeding into a pool that glowed with the same green light. Around the altar stood 3 figures in black robes, their faces hidden by deep hoods, their hands still raised from completing whatever ritual required such a sacrifice. They turned as one when we entered, and I felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure, like invisible hands trying to crush the breath from my lungs. Theron stepped in front of me, his entire body blazing with silver light, magic crackling around him in visible waves. "You dare!" he snarled, his voice echoing with power that made the very stones tremble. "You dare defile this sacred place with your blood magic, your corruption, your—" "Guardian," one of the figures interrupted, her voice female and filled with dark amusement. "Still here after all these years, still faithful, still pointless." She lowered her hood, revealing a face that was beautiful and terrible, ageless in the way only the truly ancient could be, with eyes that swirled with shadows. "You cannot stop what has already begun. The Wintermoon whelp has opened the door for us. Her blood sings in these stones, calling to the crystals, weakening the seals you spent decades reinforcing." "Marana," Theron spat, and I heard decades of hatred in that single word. "You died. I killed you myself, burned you to ash and scattered you to the winds." The woman, Marana, laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Did you truly believe I would let a little thing like death stop me? I am eternal guardian. I am the shadow that persists when all light fails. And I have waited 40 years for this moment, for the last Wintermoon to return and gift us access to the power her pathetic bloodline tried to hide. Rage unlike anything I had ever felt surged through me, hot and violent, my wolf rising to the surface with a snarl that echoed Lycan's. "You will not touch the crystals. You will not defile my family's legacy, and you will die for murdering that girl." I attacked before Theron could stop me, my sword singing through the air aimed at Marana's throat. She blocked with a shield of dark magic that sent sparks flying, the impact jarring my arm so badly I nearly dropped my blade. Lycan leaped at the other 2 robed figures, his jaws snapping, his claws tearing through fabric and flesh. Theron's magic exploded outward, silver light slamming into the corrupted green glow, the two forces meeting with a crack like thunder. The battle was chaos. Mirana's magic was vicious and unpredictable, shadow tendrils that tried to wrap around my throat, my limbs, seeking to immobilize me while she tore me apart. I dodged and weaved, using speed over strength, my sword finding gaps in her defenses, scoring shallow cuts that bled black blood thick as oil. Behind me, I could hear Theron chanting, ancient words that made the air itself vibrate, casting spells I had never seen before, magic so powerful it made my teeth ache. One of the robed figures fell to lichen, throat torn out, body convulsing as it died. The other fled, disappearing up the stairs with inhuman speed. Mirana hissed in fury, her attacks becoming more desperate, more wild. I pressed my advantage, driving her back toward the altar, toward the pool of blood that still glowed with sickly light. "You think you have won!" Mirana snarled, her beautiful face twisting into something monstrous. "You think stopping us here matters? There are 30 of my sisters surrounding this tower even now, waiting for my signal. They have been watching for days, since the moment the winter moon bitch arrived and began weakening the wards. When I do not return, they will attack. They will tear this place apart stone by stone, and they will take the crystals over your corpses." Ice flooded my veins. 30 witches. We were 2 people and a wolf against 30 practitioners of dark magic. We would be slaughtered. Theron must have heard her words because his magic surged even brighter, more desperate. He sent a bolt of pure lunar power at Mirana, one that caught her in the chest, and sent her flying backward into the pool of blood. She screamed as the corrupted liquid began to burn her flesh, as her own dark magic turned against her, consuming her from the inside out. Within seconds, there was nothing left but ash floating on the surface of the pool, but the victory felt hollow. Mirana's final words echoed in the chamber, a promise and a threat. 30 witches, coming for us, coming for the crystals. "We need to leave," I said, already moving toward the stairs. "If they attack while we are down here, they will trap us." Theron finished, right beside me. "Collapse the upper levels and bury us alive. It is what I would do." We ran. Up the blood-slick stairs, through the chamber with the watching queens, past the sealed doors that seemed to pulse now with urgent warning, up and up until we reached the main level and burst out into the night air. The moon was high and full, casting silver light over the ruins, illuminating the clearing around the tower, illuminating the figures that ringed the perimeter. Dozens of them. Women in black robes, standing in a perfect circle, their hands raised, their mouths moving in silent chant. As we emerged, they saw us, and their chanting grew louder, audible now, words in that same rotting language that made my skin crawl. Lycan was already moving, circling the perimeter, his nose to the ground. I followed him, and my heart sank as I understood what he was showing me. Traces of magic, evidence of surveillance spells, disturbed earth where they had been standing for days, watching, waiting. These witches had not just arrived tonight. They had been here since I first entered the tower 3 days ago, monitoring my every move, waiting for me to weaken the wards enough that they could strike. The guilt threatened to drown me. This was my fault. My presence had endangered everything. I had done exactly what Mirana accused me of. I had opened the door for them. I was the reason that girl died on an altar below. I was the reason the crystals were now vulnerable. I was the reason Theron's 40 years of sacrifice might all be for nothing. Strong hands gripped my face, forcing me to look up. Theron's storm-gray eyes bored into mine, fierce and unwavering. "Listen to me, Aurora. You could not have known. The wards were designed to respond to winter moon blood. That is their purpose, their function. You are not responsible for how our enemies chose to exploit that. But you came here to reclaim your heritage, to restore what was lost. That is not a crime. That is not weakness. That is courage." His thumbs stroked my cheekbones, his touch achingly gentle despite the urgency in his voice. "And I will not let them take you or the crystals. Do you understand me? I have spent 40 years guarding this place. I will spend 40 more if needed, and I will burn every one of those witches to ash before I let them harm you." The mate bond flared at his words, at his touch, warmth spreading through my chest and pushing back the cold grip of guilt and fear. He meant it, every word. He would die to protect me, to protect this tower, not because of duty, but because of something deeper, something that had nothing to do with oaths or bloodlines, because he cared. because the mate bond had already taken root in his heart whether he wanted to acknowledge it or not. "Then we fight together," I said, covering his hands with mine. "Teach me. Show me how to defend this place. We have until midnight before they attack. I can feel it in the magic. They are building power, preparing for a coordinated assault. We have hours. Use them." Something shifted in Theron's expression, pride mixing with fierce determination. "Very well, my queen. Let us prepare for war." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Theron taught me defensive spells, simple cantrips I could manage with my limited magical training, shields and wards that would buy us time if nothing else. I showed him military tactics I had learned from my generals, how to create choke points in the tower's architecture, where to position ourselves for maximum advantage, how to make 30 enemies fight us one at a time instead of all at once. We worked in perfect synchronization, the mate bond allowing us to anticipate each other's movements, to communicate without words, to function as a single unit, despite having known each other for mere days. When he reached for a particular grimoire, I was already pulling it from the shelf. When I moved to reinforce a particular doorway, he was already there with magic to shore up the crumbling stone. We moved like dancers following choreography written in our very DNA, like warriors who had fought side by side for years instead of hours. Lycan ran patrol around the tower's perimeter, tracking the witches' movements, alerting us whenever they shifted position or changed their chanting patterns. He was our early warning system, our eyes and nose monitoring threats we could not see from inside. As the night deepened and midnight approached, we found ourselves in the upper chamber that gave the best view of the surrounding clearing. Theron had set up a defensive perimeter of wards and traps, magical triggers that would alert us the moment the witches moved from surveillance to attack. I had positioned weapons at strategic points, my sword, several daggers I carried, even broken stone that could be used as projectiles if we were desperate enough. We stood together at the shattered window, watching the circle of black-robed figures, watching the moon climb higher, watching our doom approach with the inevitability of dawn. "Tell me something," I said softly, not looking at him, not sure I could bear to see his face when I asked what came next. "If we die here tonight, if they overwhelm us and take the crystals and destroy everything you have protected for 40 years, will you regret not running, not taking the chance to escape when you could?" "No," Theron said without hesitation. "I would regret running for the rest of whatever short life I managed to eke out. This is my purpose, Aurora. This tower, these crystals, this legacy. It is what I chose when I took my oath. It is what I choose now." I finally looked at him, studying his profile in the moonlight, the sharp angles of his face, the way his dark hair caught silver light. "Even if it means dying with a woman you barely know, a queen who brought destruction to your door?" He turned then, and the intensity in his eyes stole my breath. "You did not bring destruction. You brought hope. You brought purpose beyond mere survival. You brought—" He stopped, jaw clenching, fighting some internal battle. "You brought the possibility that I might be more than just a guardian, that I might be allowed to want things, to need things, to be something other than a weapon aimed at enemies who stopped coming decades ago." My heart was thundering so hard I could barely hear my own voice. "What do you want, Theron?" "I want what I have no right to want," he said roughly. "I want to see you claim the crystals. I want to help you restore this tower and rebuild your dynasty. I want to stand beside you as more than just a guardian. I want—" He made a frustrated sound. "I want to stop being alone. I want to matter to someone beyond what I can protect or destroy. I want to be seen as a man, not just a collection of oaths and obligations." "Then look at me," I commanded, stepping closer until we were nearly touching, until I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. "Really look at me, and see what I see. I see a man who sacrificed everything for duty. I see a warrior who stood guard over an empty tower for 40 years, just in case someone worthy returned. I see someone loyal and fierce, and strong enough to endure decades of solitude without breaking. I see someone capable of caring so deeply he would rather die than abandon what he has sworn to protect." I reached up, cupping his face as he had done to me earlier, feeling the rasp of stubble, the warmth of his skin, the way he trembled at my touch. "I see my mate. And that is not nothing, Theron Blackstone. That is everything." The last of his restraint shattered. He kissed me with the desperation of a man who thought he might never get another chance, his hands fisting in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss until I was drowning in him, in his taste and scent, and the overwhelming rightness of his mouth on mine. I kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all my fear and hope and defiance into that kiss, claiming him as thoroughly as he was claiming me. The mate bond roared to life between us, stronger than before, a living thing that bound us together at a level far deeper than flesh. I could feel his heartbeat as though it were my own, could sense his emotions, fear for me, determination to protect, desire so intense it made my knees weak, and underneath it all, love beginning to take root, despite every reason he had to resist it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "If we survive this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We will survive," I interrupted fiercely. "We will survive, and we will claim the crystals, and we will rebuild this tower together, and then we will have all the time in the world to want things, to explore this bond, to figure out what we are to each other beyond guardian and queen." He smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. "Is that a royal command?" "It is a promise," I said, "and I always keep my promises." Whatever he might have said next was cut off by Lycan's urgent howl. We rushed to the window and saw what our wolf companion had sensed. The witches were moving. The circle was contracting, drawing closer to the tower, their chanting growing louder, more frenzied. Above them, the full moon seemed to pulse in response. Or perhaps that was the tower itself, the ancient magic waking to defend itself against corruption. And then, at exactly midnight, the siege began. The first assault hit the tower like a battering ram, dark magic slamming into Theron's wards with enough force to make the entire structure shudder. Stone rained down from the damaged ceiling, and I heard the ominous crack of walls that had already been weakened by decades of neglect. The witches' chanting rose to a scream, 30 voices united in a single purpose: tear down the tower, kill the guardians, claim the crystals. Theron's hands moved in complex patterns, channeling magic through the wards he had laid, reinforcing them, redirecting the attacks away from the most damaged sections. I could see the strain on his face, could see sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the freezing air. He was one man against 30, and while he was powerful, he was not invincible. "Tell me what to do," I said urgently. "I cannot fight magic with a sword, but there must be something—" "The lunar crystals," Theron gritted out between clenched teeth. "If you can access them, channel even a fraction of their power, you can feed it into the tower's defenses. The wards respond to Wintermoon blood. You could amplify my magic 100-fold. But the sealed doors, I will break the seal. We have no choice. If we do not use the crystals to defend the tower, the witches will simply take them after they kill us." Another impact rocked the tower, this one strong enough to knock me off my feet. Lycan caught me, his massive body bracing mine, his eyes blazing with determination. Together, the three of us ran for the sealed doors, for the crystal chamber, for the power that might save us all or damn us forever. The tower trembled, the witches chanted, and above it all, the full moon watched, silent and knowing, as the last winter moon raced to claim her destiny. They came like a plague of ravens, and the first thing they stole was my breath. The sealed doors exploded inward before we reached them, black magic tearing through stone that had stood for centuries, ripping apart the barriers Theron had reinforced with his own blood. The blast threw me backward, my body slamming into a column hard enough to crack ribs, the air punching from my lungs in a sound that was half gasp, half scream. I tasted copper, felt warm blood trickling from my nose and ears, saw stars dancing across my vision as I struggled to push myself upright. Theron was already on his feet, his hands weaving patterns so fast they blurred, silver shields materializing in layers around us as the first wave of attack magic slammed into the tower. The sound was deafening, like thunder and shattering glass combined, the impact reverberating through every stone, every beam, shaking the foundations until I thought the entire structure would collapse on our heads. Through the destroyed doorway poured darkness, not simple absence of light, but living shadow, writhing and hungry, carrying with it the stench of decay and the screams of things that should not exist. And within that darkness came the witches, 30 figures in black robes that seemed to absorb light, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods, their hands glowing with sickly green magic that made my stomach turn just looking at it. They moved with coordinated precision, spreading out through the chamber in a formation designed to overwhelm and surround. I counted quickly. my tactical mind automatically assessing threats and weaknesses, even as my body screamed in pain. 30 against 3. 30 trained practitioners of dark magic against one mage, one warrior queen with minimal magical training, and one wolf dog. We were going to die here. The thought was cold and clear and absolute, but if I was going to die, I would do it fighting, would take as many of these corrupted witches with me as I could manage. I drew my sword, the silver blade singing as it left its sheath, and felt something shift inside me. The lunar magic Theron had been teaching me for 3 days suddenly clicked into place, no longer theoretical, but visceral and real, flowing through my veins like liquid moonlight. I could feel the full moon above us, could feel its power pouring down through the shattered ceiling, could feel it answering the call in my winter moon blood. My blade began to glow, silver light running along its edge like living mercury, and when I swung it in an arc, the light followed, slicing through the darkness and forcing it back. One of the witches screamed as the light touched her, her robes catching fire with silver flame that consumed her in seconds, leaving nothing but ash. Lycan was a blur of silver fur and gleaming fangs, moving faster than I had ever seen him move, tearing into the witches with savage efficiency. He went for throats and tendons, crippling strikes designed to disable and kill, his mystical nature allowing him to sense where the witches would move before they moved there. 2 more fell to his jaws, their blood black and thick, steaming in the cold air. But for every witch we killed, it seemed 3 more pressed forward, their magic battering at Theron's shields with relentless fury. I could see the strain on his face, could see blood beginning to leak from his nose as he poured more and more of himself into maintaining our defenses. The shields were cracking, fractures appearing in the silver light, spiderwebbing outward with each impact. We needed to change tactics. We could not simply defend and react. We needed to attack, to disrupt their coordination, to force them into making mistakes. I reached out through the mate bond, that connection between Theron and me, that had been growing stronger with each passing hour, and pushed my thoughts at him wordlessly. The plan formed between us without speech, perfectly synchronized, our minds operating as one unit. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. The shields dropped. For 1 heartbeat, we were completely exposed, vulnerable to the barrage of dark magic that had been hammering at our defenses. The witches shrieked in triumph, redoubling their assault, certain they had won. But Theron was not defending anymore. He was attacking. The explosion of lunar magic that erupted from his hands was nothing like what I had seen him use before. This was raw power, ancient and terrible, the kind of magic that required blood sacrifice and could reshape reality itself. Silver light erupted outward in a wave that incinerated everything it touched, consuming half the witches before they could even scream, turning them to ash and memory. I used the opening he created, charging into the gap with Lycan at my side, my sword a silver arc cutting through robes and flesh and bone. The remaining witches fell back, their formation breaking, their coordination shattered by the ferocity of our counterattack. We fought like demons, like wolves protecting their den, like mates bound by destiny and desperate necessity. But there were still too many, and they were adapting, regrouping, focusing their attacks more specifically. I realized with growing horror that they were not trying to kill Theron, or even Lycan. They were targeting me. Every spell, every curse, every blast of dark magic was aimed at the last winter moon, because they understood what Theron had told me. If they killed me, the tower's connection to the winter moon bloodline would die with me, and the defenses would collapse. A bolt of shadow struck my shoulder, searing through my cloak and coat, burning flesh beneath. I screamed, nearly dropping my sword, pain whiting out my vision for a crucial second. In that second, 3 more spells found their mark. Fire across my ribs, ice in my thigh, something that felt like claws tearing at my back. I went down hard, blood pouring from too many wounds, my body refusing to obey commands. Theron roared my name, his voice raw with anguish and fury, and the mate bond flared so bright I could see it, silver light connecting us like a physical tether. He moved between me and the witches, his magic becoming a storm around him, shields and attacks woven together in patterns so complex I could not follow them, defending and destroying simultaneously. But even he was not infinite. I could see him flagging, could see the way his movements slowed fractionally, the way his breathing became labored, the way blood poured from wounds I had not seen him take. He was dying to protect me, burning through his life force to keep me alive for seconds more, and those seconds were running out. Through the pain and blood loss and creeping cold, I saw her, the witch who stepped forward from the ranks, lowering her hood to reveal a face I had only seen in nightmares and ancient portraits. Beautiful and terrible, ageless in a way that spoke of dark bargains and forbidden magic, with eyes like bottomless pits and lips curved in a smile that promised suffering. Morana the Deathless, the witch Theron had killed 40 years ago, the witch who had murdered my great-grandmother, the witch who should not exist, and yet stood before us, laughing at our shock and despair. "Did you think I would let a little thing like death stop me, Guardian?" Her voice was silk over razors, sweet and poisonous. "I am eternal. I am the shadow that persists when all light fails. And the foolish girl has done exactly what I needed. She opened the door, she weakened the wards, she gave us access to what her pathetic bloodline tried to hide." Theron's face went ashen, then purple with rage. "I will kill you again, Morana. I will burn you so thoroughly there will not even be memory of you left." "You are welcome to try," she purred, raising her hands. "But first, let us deal with the liability." The spell hit me before I could move, before I could scream, before I could do anything but watch in frozen horror as black ice erupted from the ground beneath my feet. It spread up my legs with impossible speed, so cold it burned, so painful I could not even draw breath to cry out. The ice climbed my body like grasping hands, covering my torso, my arms, my throat, my face, until I was encased completely in crystalline black frost. And the worst part, the most terrible part, was that I remained conscious. Trapped inside my frozen prison, I could see, could hear, could feel my heart beating slower and slower, as the cold leached the life from my body. I could not move, could not speak, could not even blink. I could only watch as Theron turned toward me, his face contorting with an anguish so profound it made what I felt seem insignificant by comparison. The mate bond screamed. Not a metaphor, not exaggeration. It literally screamed, a sound that existed beyond physical hearing, a psychic agony transmitted directly through the connection between us. I felt his pain as my own, felt the bond tearing at him, demanding he save his mate, demanding he do something, anything, howling at the injustice of finding each other only to be torn apart. Something in Theron broke, or perhaps something that had been broken for 40 years finally healed. I could not be certain which, trapped as I was in my frozen tomb, dying by inches, watching through layers of ice as the man I barely knew but was bound to by fate transformed into something terrifying. The magic that erupted from him was not silver anymore. It was white, blinding, pure lunar power channeled directly from the moon above, power that should have killed him to wield, but instead made him incandescent, a god made flesh, terrible and beautiful, and absolutely unstoppable. He moved through the remaining witches like a scythe through wheat, his hands no longer forming careful spells, but simply pointing, and whatever he pointed at ceased to exist, unmade at a fundamental level, erased from reality. Screams filled the air, cut short as witch after witch fell to his fury, to the desperation of a mate protecting his bonded, to 40 years of restraint finally breaking. Lycan fought beside him, no longer just a wolf dog, but something more, something ancient, awakening in response to the lunar magic saturating the air. His fur glowed silver white, his eyes blazed like twin suns, and his jaws tore through dark magic as easily as flesh, destroying spells before they could form, breaking curses with his very presence. Morana shrieked in fury and fear, realizing too late that she had miscalculated, that threatening a mate bond was not a tactical advantage but a death sentence. She tried to flee, her form dissolving into shadow, but Theron was faster. His hand shot out and grabbed her by the throat, dragging her back into corporeal form, holding her suspended as she writhed and clawed at his grip. "You wanted the last winter moon dead," he said, his voice echoing with power that made the stones tremble. "You wanted to break the bloodline, to destroy the legacy, but you failed to understand what that legacy truly means, what it is to be guardian to a winter moon queen, what it is to be bound to one by fate itself." Morana's eyes widened in understanding and terror. "No, you would not dare. The backlash would—" "I do not care," Theron said flatly, and then his free hand pressed against her chest, directly over her heart, and I watched as he channeled everything he had into one final spell. Lunar fire, Not the silver flame I had seen before, but white fire that burned only corruption, only darkness, only that which had turned its back on the moon goddess. It erupted from Morana's chest like a star being born, expanding outward in a wave that consumed her, consumed the remaining witches, consumed every trace of dark magic in a 50-foot radius. The screams were mercifully brief. Within seconds, there was nothing left but ash drifting on the wind. 30 witches reduced to memory and carbon. Morana's final expression of shock and betrayal frozen in soot, before it too disintegrated. Silence fell, a silence so profound after the chaos of battle that it felt heavy, oppressive, broken only by the sound of Theron's ragged breathing and the drip of blood onto stone. His blood, too much of it. Pouring from wounds I had not seen him take, from the strain of channeling power that should have killed him, from 40 years of solitude and 3 days of desperate hope all culminating in this moment. He collapsed to his knees, swaying, his hands reaching toward my frozen form, even as his strength failed. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell him to save himself, wanted to do anything but watch helplessly as he crawled toward me on hands and knees, leaving a trail of blood behind him. "Not going to lose you," he muttered, his words slurring with blood loss and exhaustion. "Not after 40 years. Not after finding you. Not going to—" His forehead pressed against the ice encasing me, his breath fogging the surface. His hands splayed flat as though he could warm me through sheer force of will. The mate bond pulsed between us, weaker now, damaged by the torture of watching each other suffer, but still present, still insistent, still demanding we fight for each other. "I did not wait 40 years for you to die," Theron whispered, his voice breaking. "I did not endure decades alone just to lose my mate within days of finding her. I will not accept this. I refuse." He bit his own wrist with savage force, tearing through flesh until blood welled up, thick and red and laced with magic, with the mate bond itself made physical. He held his wrist over my frozen face and let the blood drip, scarlet drops falling onto black ice, steaming where they touched. The ice began to crack, hairline fractures spreading from where his blood touched, spiderwebbing outward, accompanied by sounds like breaking glass, like shattering crystal, like the death of winter itself. The cold that had been killing me by inches suddenly released its grip, warmth flooding back into my limbs, my lungs, my heart. The ice shattered completely, exploding outward in a cloud of black frost that dissipated on contact with air, and I fell forward into Theron's arms, gasping, choking, alive. We collapsed together onto the blood-soaked stone, his arms wrapped around me, his face buried in my hair, both of us shaking with reaction and relief, and the sheer impossibility of survival. I could breathe. I could move. I was alive. "Aurora?" Theron breathed against my hair, my throat, anywhere he could reach, repeating my name like a prayer, like a promise. "Aurora, Aurora, I have you. You are safe. You are alive. I have you." I tried to speak, to tell him I was all right, but my throat was raw from screaming I could not release while frozen, and all that came out was a broken sob. I clung to him instead, my hands fisting in his torn shirt, feeling the warmth of his skin, the solid reality of his presence, grounding myself in the fact that we were both still here, still breathing, still together. A whimper cut through our reunion. We both froze, then turned toward the sound. Lycan lay several feet away, his silver fur matted with blood, his breathing shallow and labored, his eyes dulled with pain. And in his side, buried to the hilt, was a dagger of black crystal, the same material as the corrupted altar below, pulsing with dark magic that was spreading through his body like poison, killing him slowly and agonizingly. "No," I breathed, already moving, crawling on hands and knees because I could not yet stand, my body still recovering from being frozen and thawed. "No, no, no, Lycan, hold on, please." Theron was beside me, his hands hovering over the wound but not touching, his face grim. "The blade is cursed. If we remove it, the poison will flood his system and kill him within seconds. If we leave it, the curse will kill him within minutes." "Then we break the curse," I said fiercely, my hands already reaching for the dagger's hilt, for the wolf dog who had stood beside me through everything, who had taken a killing blow meant for me. "Tell me how. There must be a way." "Lunar magic," Theron said quickly. "Pure lunar power channeled directly through the bond you share with him. But Aurora, you have never channeled that much magic before. The strain could—" I do not care about the strain, I snapped, cutting him off. He is dying because of me, because he protected me. I will not let him die. I wrapped both hands around the dagger's hilt, feeling the corruption trying to crawl up my arms, trying to infect me as it had infected Lycan. The mate bond pulsed, and I felt Theron's magic joining mine, reinforcing me, giving me strength I did not have on my own. Together, we began to pull, to draw the blade out slowly, carefully, while simultaneously pouring lunar magic into the wound, burning away the poison before it could spread. Lycan whimpered, his body convulsing, but his eyes remained fixed on mine, trusting, loyal even now, even dying. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with blood and dirt, but I did not stop, did not slow, channeling power I did not know I possessed, drawing on the full moon above us, on the lunar crystals somewhere below us, on the mate bond connecting me to Theron and the companion bond connecting me to Lycan. The dagger came free with a wet sound, black crystal steaming in my hands before it crumbled to ash. The wound beneath glowed silver-white with lunar fire, burning clean, burning pure, burning away the last traces of corruption. Lycan's breathing steadied, deepened, his eyes brightening, the color returning to his fur. I collapsed over him, sobbing with relief, one hand pressed to his side where the wound was already closing, the other buried in his fur. He licked my face weakly, his tail giving a single thump against the ground, and I laughed through my tears, overwhelmed by the simple fact that he was alive. We were all alive. We had survived. Strong hands lifted me, cradled me against a broad chest. Theron was carrying me, moving through the devastation of the upper chamber toward the sealed doors, or what remained of them after Mirana's assault. His breathing was labored, his steps unsteady, but his grip was unwavering. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice hoarse and weak. "The crystal chamber," Theron said. "There is only one way to seal the tower permanently now, to ensure no one else can ever threaten it or you. The claiming ritual. The mate bond must be completed and bound to the tower's magic. It is the only way." I understood what he was asking. The claiming ritual was permanent, eternal, binding me to him and him to me, and both of us to this tower for as long as we lived. It would make me not just a winter moon queen, but the tower's living guardian, my power and Theron's intertwined with the ancient magic of this place. It would change everything. It would also complete what the mate bond had been demanding since the moment we touched, would give us the strength to truly restore this place, would ensure that what we had fought for tonight would not be in vain. Theron carried me down the destroyed stairs, past the sealed doors that were no longer sealed, into depths I had not yet explored. The air grew warmer instead of colder, filled with silver light that had no visible source, humming with power so old and vast it made my teeth ache. Lycan followed, still weak, but recovering with every step, his mystical nature accelerating his healing. The crystal chamber was breathtaking, walls carved from living rock and embedded with lunar crystals the size of my head, each one pulsing with its own internal light, creating patterns of silver and white that danced across the ceiling. A pool of liquid moonlight dominated the center of the chamber, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the crystals above. And around the pool, carved into the stone floor, were runes in a language so ancient I could feel their meaning more than read it. Claiming, binding, union, forever. Theron set me down gently at the pool's edge, kneeling beside me. His storm-gray eyes met mine, and in them I saw fear and hope warring for dominance. "This is not just a mate bond," he said quietly. "This is permanent in ways that transcend normal mating. We would be bound not just to each other, but to this tower, to the magic, to the duty of protecting it. You would give up any chance at a normal life, at ruling from a comfortable palace, at—" I stopped him with a kiss, pouring everything I could not articulate into that contact. When I pulled back, I cupped his face in my hands and spoke with absolute conviction. "I am the last winter moon. There is no normal life for me, no comfortable palace, no escape from duty. But with you, with this tower, with the purpose you have shown me, I could have something better. I could have meaning. I could have partnership. I could have love." His breath caught. "Aurora, perform the ritual," I said firmly. "Bind us together. Make me your mate and your queen and this tower's guardian. Let us rebuild what was destroyed and create something stronger from the ruins." For a long moment, he simply stared at me, searching my face for any hint of doubt or reservation. He must have found none, because slowly, reverently, he nodded. Then by the power of the moon goddess, by the magic of the winter moon bloodline, by the bond that fate has woven between us, he lifted my hand to his lips, kissed my palm, then pressed it over his heart. I claim you, Aurora Wintermoon. I bind myself to you, to your bloodline, to your duty, for as long as the moon rises and the stars burn, and the earth turns beneath our feet. The magic surged around us, silver light erupting from the lunar crystals, from the pool, from the very walls themselves. I felt it enter me through my palm pressed to Theron's chest, felt it flowing through the mate bond, amplifying and transforming it into something more than simple biological imperative. I claim you, Theron Blackstone, I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. I bind myself to you, to your duty, to this tower we will protect together. I accept the responsibility, the burden, the joy, and the sorrow. For as long as breath fills my lungs and blood flows through my veins, I am yours, and you are mine. The magic exploded outward, wrapping around us like invisible threads, binding us together at a level far deeper than flesh or bone or even soul. I felt Theron in my mind, in my heart, felt his emotions as clearly as my own. Love fierce and desperate, devotion that transcended reason, determination to protect and cherish and honor the gift fate had given him. And beneath it all, the tower itself, welcoming me home, recognizing me as its queen, its guardian, its living heart. The power that had been sleeping for 40 years woke fully, responding to the completed bond, to the promise we had made. I felt the ward strengthening, felt the damaged walls beginning to heal, felt the very foundations of the tower solidifying and stabilizing. We collapsed together into the pool of liquid moonlight, and instead of drowning, we were transformed. The magic entered our bodies, our blood, our bones, rewriting us at a fundamental level, making us more than human, more than simply mated, making us eternal as long as the tower stood. When we finally emerged, gasping and transformed and bound beyond breaking, Lycan was waiting, his eyes glowing with approval and joy. The crystal chamber pulsed with renewed life, the lunar crystals blazing brighter than they had in decades, singing with power that would protect and preserve and endure. I looked at Theron, at the man who was now my mate, my partner, my eternal companion, and saw my own wonder and determination reflected in his eyes. We will rebuild this tower, I said quietly, my hand clasped in his. We will restore the Wintermoon legacy. We will ensure no one ever threatens this place again. Together, Theron agreed, pulling me close, his forehead resting against mine. For as long as the moon rises. Together, I echoed. Forever. The crystal chamber was not a throne room. It was a temple where queens became goddesses, and guardians became mates. The stairs descended deeper than I thought possible, spiraling down through layers of stone and magic, each step bringing us closer to the heart of the tower, to the source of power that had sustained this place for centuries. Theron carried me as though I weighed nothing, despite his wounds, despite the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, despite everything we had endured. His grip never faltered, never wavered, and I clung to him, my face pressed against his neck, breathing in his scent of pine and smoke and wild magic, grounding myself in the reality that we were both alive, both here, both choosing this. Lycan padded behind us, his breathing still labored but growing stronger with each moment, the lunar magic we had channeled into him continuing its healing work. His presence was a comfort, a reminder that we had not lost everything in the battle, that some things could be saved, could be healed, could endure. The temperature shifted as we descended, growing warmer instead of colder, the air thick with power so ancient and vast it made my skin prickle with awareness. Silver light began to emanate from the walls themselves, growing brighter with each step, until we emerged into a chamber that stole my breath and made my heart clench with something that felt like coming home. The crystal chamber was magnificent. The walls were not simply stone, but living rock embedded with lunar crystals the size of my head, each one pulsing with its own internal rhythm, creating a symphony of light that danced across vaulted ceilings carved with constellations I had only read about in ancient texts. The crystals hummed, a sound I felt in my bones rather than heard with my ears, resonating with the winter moon blood flowing through my veins, welcoming me, recognizing me as the lost daughter finally returned. In the center of the chamber lay a pool of liquid moonlight, its surface so still it looked like polished silver, reflecting the crystal-studded ceiling above in perfect detail. Around the pool, carved into the stone floor in letters that glowed with their own light, were runes in a language older than any kingdom, older than written history, old as the moon itself. I could not read them with my eyes, but I understood them with something deeper, more primal, claiming, binding, union, eternity. This was where Wintermoon queens had been claimed by their mates for generations beyond counting, where the mate bond was not simply acknowledged but consecrated, transformed into something sacred and unbreakable. This was where magic and flesh and soul became one, where two individuals merged into a partnership that transcended the limitations of mortality. This was where I would either become what I was meant to be, or fail my entire bloodline. Terror gripped me, so intense I could barely breathe. Theron must have felt it through our incomplete bond, because he set me down gently at the pool's edge, kneeling before me, his hands cupping my face with a tenderness that made my eyes burn with unshed tears. "I am afraid," I whispered, the admission torn from me against every instinct that said a queen must never show weakness, must never admit vulnerability. I have never been claimed. At 32, I thought I would die unmated, unwanted, the last failure of a dying bloodline. I do not know how to do this. I do not know if I will be enough. Theron's expression softened, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones with infinite gentleness. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Aurora Wintermoon? I see a woman who conquered 12 kingdoms without spilling blood. I see a queen who values wisdom over warfare, who builds alliances instead of destroying them. I see someone brave enough to walk into ruins guarded by a hostile mage, someone strong enough to stand against an army of dark witches, someone loyal enough to risk everything to save her companion." He pressed his forehead to mine, his breath ghosting across my lips. "I see the woman I have been waiting for my entire life without knowing I was waiting. I see my mate, my partner, my queen. You are not just enough, Aurora. You are everything." The tears spilled over then, tracking down my cheeks, and I did not try to stop them. For so long I had carried the weight of being the last Wintermoon, the pressure to produce heirs, the whispers that I was cursed, broken, insufficient. Hearing Theron speak those words, feeling the absolute conviction behind them, something in my chest cracked open, years of fear and inadequacy pouring out like poison from a lanced wound. "Teach me," I said, my voice steadier now, strengthened by his faith in me. "Show me what to do. I want this. I want you. I want us." Theron smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted, full of hope I had not seen before. He stood, offering me his hand, and together we walked to the altar of moonstone that stood beside the pool. It was carved from a single piece of white stone that seemed to glow from within, its surface covered with more of those ancient runes, more words I understood without reading. He removed his torn shirt, revealing the full extent of the runes carved into his skin. I had seen glimpses before, but never like this. Never the complete tapestry of marks that covered his chest, his shoulders, his arms. They were beautiful and terrible, intricate patterns that told a story written in scars and magic, each one representing a vow he had made, a sacrifice he had endured, a piece of himself he had given to protect this place. "These are the marks of my oath," Theron said quietly, his fingers tracing one particularly elaborate rune over his heart. "When I became the tower's guardian, I bound myself with blood magic, carved these symbols into my own flesh, so that my life would be tied to this place, so that I could never abandon my post even if I wanted to. For 40 years, these marks have been my prison and my purpose." I reached out with trembling fingers, tracing the runes, feeling the raised edges of scar tissue, the faint pulse of magic beneath the surface. Each mark was a testament to his devotion, to his willingness to sacrifice everything for duty. "They are beautiful," I whispered. "You are beautiful." His hands caught mine, stilling them over his heart where I could feel the strong, steady beat beneath my palms. "The claiming ritual will add new marks," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Marks that bind us together, that tie your magic to mine, that make us one entity in the eyes of the moon goddess. Once completed, it cannot be undone. Not by death, not by time, not by any force in this world or beyond it. You need to understand what you are accepting, Aurora. This is not simply a mate bond. This is eternal partnership, eternal responsibility, eternal binding to this tower and everything it represents." I looked up at him, This man who had suffered alone for 4 decades, who had remained faithful to a duty most would have abandoned, who had opened his heart to me despite every reason to keep it locked away. "I understand," I said clearly, "and I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." The ritual began with words. Theron spoke first, his voice resonating with power as he intoned phrases in that ancient language, each syllable causing the crystals around us to pulse brighter, the pool of moonlight to ripple, despite no breeze touching its surface. I did not understand the individual words, but their meaning flowed into me through the incomplete bond between us. Protection, devotion, unity, strength. When it was my turn to speak, the words came from somewhere deep within, from the genetic memory of every winter moon queen who had stood in this chamber before me, their voices echoing through time to guide their lost daughter home. My tongue-shaped syllables I had never learned. My throat produced sounds that resonated with the magic saturating this place, and with each word I felt my power growing, awakening, unfurling like wings I had not known I possessed. Partnership, trust, love, forever. The air between us shimmered with silver light, the mate bond becoming visible, threads of magic connecting us at dozens of points, weaving a tapestry of connection that grew more complex with each passing moment. Theron took my right hand in his, turned it palm up, and with a ritual blade that appeared in his other hand, made a precise cut across my palm. The pain was sharp but brief, blood welling up immediately, running down my wrist in scarlet rivulets. He made the same cut on his own palm, then pressed our wounded hands together, our blood mixing, our magic intertwining, our very essences beginning to merge. The sensation was overwhelming, intimate beyond anything I had ever experienced. I could feel him, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, every barrier between us dissolving until I did not know where I ended and he began. We moved together to the largest crystal in the chamber, a massive structure that rose from the floor like a pillar of frozen moonlight, easily twice my height and pulsing with power that made my teeth ache. Together, we pressed our joined hands against its surface, and our combined blood, still flowing freely, ran down the crystal's face in channels carved for this exact purpose. The magic exploded. Silver light erupted from the crystal, from every crystal in the chamber, from the pool, from the runes carved into floor and walls and ceiling. It poured into us through our joined hands, through the wounds that still bled, through every pore and cell and atom of our beings. I screamed, not in pain but in ecstasy and terror combined, my body unable to contain the sheer magnitude of power flowing through it, my mind fragmenting under the weight of suddenly understanding magic at a level I had never dreamed possible. Theron's arms wrapped around me, his voice in my ear speaking words of comfort and encouragement, anchoring me to reality as the magic threatened to sweep me away entirely. "Stay with me," he commanded, his tone allowing no argument. "Do not let go. We do this together, or not at all." I clung to him, to his solid presence, to the sound of his voice and the warmth of his body, and the absolute certainty in his words. Gradually, the chaos began to organize itself, the raw power becoming something I could channel, something I could work with instead of simply endure. I felt the lunar magic recognizing me as Winter Moon, felt it flowing into the empty spaces in my soul where it had always belonged but never been allowed to settle. When the initial surge finally subsided, we stood entwined in the crystal's light, both of us glowing with power, our eyes reflecting silver, our blood singing with magic that would never fully fade. The mate bond hummed between us, stronger now, deeper, but not yet complete. The marking remained. Theron's hand slid to my shoulders, his touch reverent, worshipful. "The final step," he said quietly, his eyes searching mine for any hesitation. "The traditional mark. The physical claiming that seals what magic has begun." I understood what he meant. Among wolf shifters, among those who carried animal spirits, the mate bond was sealed with a bite at the junction of neck and shoulder, a mark that announced to the world and to the soul itself that this person was claimed, bonded, taken. It was primal and permanent, and once done, it could never be undone. "Mark me," I whispered, tilting my head to expose my throat, offering him the most vulnerable part of myself. "Claim me. Make me yours." Theron's control shattered. His arms banded around me, pulling me flush against his body, and I felt his canines elongate, felt the wolf in him rising to the surface, called forth by the claiming ritual and the mate bond and the sheer rightness of this moment. He nuzzled into my neck, his breath hot against my skin, his lips tracing the line where he would mark me. "Mine," he growled, his voice roughened by the wolf, by possession, by 40 years of loneliness finally ending. My mate, my queen, mine. The bite, when it came, was sharp and sweet. Pain and pleasure so intertwined I could not separate them. His teeth sank into my flesh, not tearing, but piercing cleanly, marking me at a level far deeper than skin. I felt the mate bond snap into place, complete and unbreakable. Felt his soul touching mine in a way that transcended physical sensation. Felt everything he was pouring into me through that connection. Love, fierce and desperate and absolute. Devotion that would endure beyond death. Determination to protect and cherish and honor me for as long as existence itself continued. And beneath it all, wonder that after 40 years of darkness, he had finally found his light. When he released me, his tongue soothing the wound he had created, I felt blood trickling down my shoulder, felt the mark beginning to heal, but knowing it would leave a permanent scar, a visible brand that announced my claimed status to anyone who looked. "Your turn," Theron said, his voice still rough, his eyes blazing with satisfaction, and something darker, more possessive. He tilted his head, exposing his own throat, offering me the same vulnerability I had given him. I had not known my own canines could elongate. I had not known the wolf spirit slumbered inside me, waiting for this exact moment to wake. But as I looked at Theron's exposed throat, at the mark I would place there, my canines sharpened, my wolf surged forward, and suddenly I understood what it meant to claim, to mark, to possess. I struck without hesitation, my teeth sinking into his flesh with primal satisfaction, my wolf recognizing its mate, my magic recognizing its equal, my soul recognizing its other half. Through the connection our blood created, I felt Theron's response, felt him surrender to me as completely as I had surrendered to him, felt the mate bond becoming truly bidirectional, truly equal, truly perfect. When I released him, licking the wound to help it heal as instinct demanded, we stood together in the crystal chamber, both marked, both claimed, both transformed. The mate bond sang between us, complete at last, no longer straining or demanding, but settled and satisfied and eternal. The crystals exploded with light. Every single lunar crystal in the chamber blazed brighter than the sun, silver radiance pouring from them in waves that washed over us, through us, into the very stones of the tower itself. The pool of liquid moonlight began to glow, its surface rippling now with energy, sending concentric circles of power outward that climbed the walls, raced along the ceiling, spread throughout the entire structure, and the tower responded. I felt it through the soles of my feet, through the bond I now shared with this place, through the winter moon blood that had finally come home. Stone that had been crumbling for decades suddenly solidified, cracks healing themselves, walls standing straight and true once more. The broken stairs we had descended repaired themselves, steps reforming from dust and rubble. Above us, far above in the upper levels, I sensed the collapsed ceiling sealing itself, shattered windows becoming whole, doors that had rotted away growing from nothing. The lunar tower was rebuilding itself, powered by the completed mate bond, by the union of guardian and queen, by the return of purpose and magic and hope after 40 years of decay and despair. Theron and I stood at the center of it all, our hands clasped, our marks fresh and bleeding, our magic intertwined so completely that I could no longer tell where his power ended and mine began. We were no longer two separate individuals. We were a partnership, a unit, a force that would protect this tower and everything it represented for as long as we both lived, and perhaps even beyond that. The transformation took hours. We felt every stone that lifted itself back into place, every crack that sealed, every room that was restored to its former glory. The magic poured through us continuously, using our joined power as a conduit, reshaping reality itself according to the ancient blueprints encoded in the tower's foundations. It should have been exhausting, should have drained us to the point of collapse, but instead, we felt energized, renewed, as though the magic was not taking from us but adding to us, making us more than we had been. When it finally ended, when the last stone settled into place, and the magic gradually subsided to a steady hum instead of a roaring flood, we stood together in the crystal chamber, both glowing with residual power, both changed in ways that would take years to fully understand. Lycan appeared at the top of the stairs, fully healed now, his silver fur gleaming, his amber eyes bright with approval and joy. He barked once, sharp and commanding, clearly telling us to come see what had been accomplished. Together, Theron and I climbed the stairs, ascending from the heart of the tower to its crown, following the path that had once been treacherous and was now smooth and safe. Each level we passed showed the same miraculous transformation. The libraries were restored, grimoires that had been ruined now perfectly preserved, new books appearing on shelves to replace those that had been destroyed beyond saving. The laboratories gleamed with equipment that seemed freshly forged, vials and beakers and instruments arranged in perfect order. The meditation chambers were serene and beautiful, their pools filled with clear water that reflected moonlight from mirrors that had reconstructed themselves. And when we finally emerged onto the highest balcony, stepping out into the dawn light, I gasped at what I saw. The lunar tower stood magnificent against the rising sun, no longer a ruin, but a fortress of silver stone and gleaming crystal, its walls solid and strong, its towers reaching toward the sky like prayers made physical. Light poured from windows that sparkled with glass so clear it seemed invisible, and from the very top of the highest spire, a beacon of lunar magic pulsed with steady rhythm, announcing to anyone within 100 miles that the Winter Moon dynasty had returned, that the tower was defended once more, that those who sought to threaten it would face consequences beyond their imagining. I leaned against the balcony railing, Theron's arms wrapping around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder, both of us simply staring at what we had accomplished, what we had saved, what we had created together. I conquered 12 kingdoms through diplomacy, I said softly, my voice filled with wonder. I negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements and alliances that should have been impossible. I thought that was the greatest achievement of my life. Theron's arms tightened around me, his warmth seeping into my back, his presence solid and real and permanent. And now? I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who was my mate, my partner, my equal in all things. Now I know the truth. All of those conquests, all of those achievements, they were leading me here, to you, to this tower, to a purpose greater than simply ruling, greater than simply surviving. I reached up, tracing the fresh mark on his neck, the mirror of the one he had left on mine. This crumbling tower and the man who guarded it conquered me completely, and I have never been happier to surrender. Theron smiled, that rare expression that transformed his face, and bent to kiss me with a tenderness that belied the passion I could feel simmering beneath his control. "So what now, my queen?" he murmured against my lips. "What does the future hold for us?" I felt it then, the faint flutter deep in my womb, the beginning of life that had been created during the claiming ritual, conceived in magic and moonlight and mate bond completed under the full moon. The first winter moon heir in a generation, growing inside me even now, a child who would be born with both guardian magic and royal blood, who would carry the legacy forward into a future we would build together. "Now," I said, my hand moving to rest over my still flat stomach, my smile widening as I saw understanding dawn in Theron's eyes. "We rebuild more than just the tower. We rebuild the dynasty. We create a future where Winter Moon Queens rule with wisdom, where guardians protect with honor, where the lunar tower stands as a beacon of everything our bloodline was meant to be." Theron's hand covered mine, both of us cradling the life that had already begun, and tears streaked down his face, decades of loneliness and grief finally releasing their hold. "A child," he breathed, his voice breaking with joy and disbelief. "We made a child. We made a family," I corrected gently. "You and me and Lycan and the child growing inside me and all the children who will come after. We made a future, together." Lycan howled then, long and triumphant, announcing to the world that the pack was complete, that the Alfa had claimed her mate, that new life would soon join them. The sound echoed across the forest, across the reclaimed lands, carrying with it a promise and a warning. The Winter Moon dynasty had returned. The lunar tower stood defended, and those who had thought the bloodline extinct would soon learn otherwise. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, I stood in my mate's arms, our hands joined over the life we had created, our tower restored, and gleaming behind us, our wolf companion at our feet, and felt peace settle over me like a benediction. I had spent 32 years believing I was broken, cursed, the failed end of a dying line. I had conquered kingdoms seeking purpose, and found only temporary satisfaction. I had carried the weight of a crown alone, certain I would die unmated and unmourned. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. In the ruins of my ancestral tower, I had found not just power or heritage, but love. Not just duty or obligation, but partnership. Not just survival, but purpose. I had found my mate, my equal, my home. Now we rule, I said quietly, the words both promise and declaration. Together, forever. Theron's arms tightened around me, his lips pressed to my temple, his heart beating in perfect rhythm with mine. Together, he echoed. For as long as the moon rises and the stars burn and the earth turns beneath our feet, and as the dawn broke fully over the lunar tower, I knew with absolute certainty that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The beginning of a dynasty reborn. The beginning of a love story written in magic and moonlight. The beginning of everything I had been searching for without knowing I was searching. The beginning of us. Use headphones for an incredible experience. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Alpha Queen stories. Your support helps us create more epic tales of love, magic, and empowerment. Beautiful love stories, because we are all Alpha Queens.